All right, welcome back today, guys. Today we're going to be going over our last chapter in the book, chapter 23. And this is looking at basically the second part of Reconstruction and its impact on the United States. Okay, so we're looking at several standards here: 8.72, 8.73, 8.74, and 8.75. So those are the last four standards we're going to be looking at. Basically looking at the Freedmen's Bureau. We're going to look at the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in Tennessee and the role William Brownlow plays in that. We're going to explain the roles of carpetbaggers and scalawags and explain the Compromise of 1877 and its role in ending radical Reconstruction. All right, so let's look at our essential questions here quick. What restrictions were placed on the rights and opportunities of freedmen? How was racial segregation used to restrict the rights and opportunities of freedmen? How did the Freedmen's Bureau work to address the problems confronting newly freed slaves? How did the KKK and vigilante justice grow in the South and in Tennessee? What role did Governor William Brownlow play in the rise of the KKK and vigilante justice in the South and in Tennessee? And what role did carpetbaggers and scalawags play during Reconstruction? And what did the Compromise of 1877 do? Okay. Also, I'm sorry, what role did the Compromise of 1877 play in ending radical Reconstruction? So let's go ahead and jump into the Freedmen's Bureau. Congress created the Freedmen's Bureau on March 3rd of 1865 to help the 4 million freed slaves transition into freedom. The Bureau was supposed to be temporary, but it lasted until 1872. And now, what did the Freedmen's Bureau do? It did several things. All right, it provided basic welfare services and healthcare. It fed millions of people. It helped former slaves find jobs, legalize marriages, and locate lost relatives. It built teacher training institutions and more than 1,000 schools for former slaves. And it helped create historically Black colleges and universities like Howard University and Fisk University in Nashville. All right, so speaking of education in the South, public education in the South was very limited before the Civil War. Republicans believed that education could aid social progress. So during Reconstruction, the Republicans established public school systems like we have today. So in 1867, the Tennessee legislature passed an act to create a public elementary school system here in this state. This system served both Black and white children, but the schools were segregated. Okay, so there was a Black school and there was a white school. After the Freedmen's Bureau ceased to exist in 1872, states took over many of the Black schools it supported. Okay, so that's how education kind of comes into play here during Reconstruction. Now, reviving the South's economy. So the North and the South fought most Civil War battles on Southern soil. So most of the battles were fought in the South. This led to ruin in the South, as you can kind of see in that picture, and destroyed its slave-based economic system. Okay, with the freeing of the slaves, that economic system was destroyed. So former slaves became refugees. They really didn't have a home. They didn't really know anything else other than slavery. Okay. Meanwhile, the North escaped relatively undamaged. There were very few battles in the North. Their economic system was fine, so it didn't really hurt the North as much as it did the South. So farming in the South. During the war, some Union leaders talked about breaking up plantations and giving former slaves 40 acres and a mule, but this didn't happen. All right. Landowners needed people to work their fields, and former slaves needed to make a living. Again, they really didn't know what to do. All right. They had only been a slave. They had only worked on a farm. All right. So that's what a lot of these former slaves went back to doing. Many freed slaves in Tennessee and other states turned to their old masters and became tenant farmers or sharecroppers. And in these arrangements, landowners rented out sections of their land to Black or white farmers. And since these farmers had no money for rent, they agreed to give the owner a share of their crops at harvest time. So instead of paying money, they were being paid, the landowners were being paid in crops. All right. So tenant farmers and sharecroppers. So tenant farmers often owned animals, equipment, and supplies, and received close to 3/4 of the harvest. Basically, what they needed was the land to farm. Sharecroppers, on the other hand, didn't own anything. They just contributed to the labor. They didn't have animals, they didn't have equipment, they didn't have supplies, they didn't have land. So sharecroppers received about half the crop that they planted and harvested. And since landowners also deducted rent and money spent for supplies from the crop allowance, there was basically little left for the farmer. So it was almost impossible to get ahead as a tenant farmer or sharecropper after the war. So we start to see some aid from the North. Now, the North had a lot to gain by helping the South rebuild its agriculture. The North's textile industry depended on cotton from the South. So to quicken the South's recovery, wealthy Northern investors provided the money needed to rebuild the South's railroads, mills, and cotton and tobacco farms to get them back on their feet. It wasn't just Southerners looking to rebuild the South. Many Northerners traveled to live and work in the South, and some of these were looking to take advantage of the political and economic chaos in the South, while other Northerners came to support Reconstruction and bring about change to Southern politics. So this is where we get carpetbaggers versus scalawags. All right, so carpetbaggers are what Southerners called the arriving Northerners. They called them carpetbaggers because they often carried travel bags made of carpet material. Okay, so they're basically, their suitcases are made out of carpet. All right. Now, most Southerners didn't want Northerners meddling in Southern affairs. And Southerners said that carpetbaggers only wanted to profit from the South's misfortune. Scalawags, on the other hand, were Southerners who would welcome carpetbaggers and Northern ideas. These people were called scalawags by their fellow Southerners, and scalawags were seen as traitors to the interests of the South. Okay, so carpetbaggers are Northerners moving into the South. Scalawags are Southerners who kind of welcome these carpetbaggers and kind of embrace their ideas. Scalawags are the most hated scalawags were those who supported the Republican Party and Reconstruction. Okay, and we'll kind of get into that here in a second. So, Southern responses to Reconstruction. Most ex-Confederates were conservative Democrats who resisted the changes forced on the South by radical Republicans. They resented Republican attempts to disenfranchise them after the war. Disenfranchise means not let them vote. Okay. They thought the Freedmen's Bureau was trying to convert former slaves to radical Republicanism, but most African Americans naturally supported the Republican Party because it had freed them and tried to ensure their rights as citizens. So in 1866, Governor Brownlow tried to help former slaves by helping ratify the 14th Amendment. Some Tennessee legislators refused to vote on the amendment or attend the voting session, hoping there wouldn't be enough legislators present for the vote to count. But Brownlow found out about this and even had 2 legislators arrested and jailed in the state capitol building. So even though those 2 didn't vote, they were counted as present. And the legislature voted to ratify the 14th Amendment, and Tennessee re-entered the United States before any other Confederate state. Okay. So we start to see a rise in vigilante justice. Okay, the big one of that is the Ku Klux Klan. So in 1866, 6 Confederate veterans formed the Ku Klux Klan in Pulaski, Tennessee, as a young men's social club. Okay, this was a chance for, ex-Confederate veterans to kind of come together, hang out, all that kind of stuff. But in 1867, the Klan reorganized and began terrorizing and killing former slaves with the intent of keeping whites in power. Governor Brownlow activated a militia, including 1,600 state guards, to try to crush the Klan in Tennessee. However, the Klan soon spread throughout much of the South. Okay, there are basically groups everywhere in the South, a part of the Ku Klux Klan. So Klansmen's white robes and hoods struck fear in the hearts of blacks. Klan members would attack, murder, and lynch African Americans, men, women, and children. It wasn't just to men, women, or children. It was men, women, and children, even along with their white supporters. So people who would support African Americans, try to help them get on their feet, were targets of the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan helped bring white supremacy back to the South before temporarily disbanding in 1869. All right. So restrictions of freedmen. Congress passed the 15th Amendment in 1870. At that time, Southern states used poll taxes, literacy tests, and other means to keep African Americans from voting. White officials often use a literacy test to decide who could vote. Here's an example of one over here to the right. And most former slaves were illiterate. They couldn't read, so it became difficult for them to vote and to pass this literacy test. All right. So we get toward the end of Reconstruction here. By the 1870s, Northern support for radical Reconstruction was fading. The Supreme Court placed limits on federal support for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And the results of the 1876 presidential election hinged on disputed returns from Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. Now, it just also happens to be that those were the only 3 Southern states still under Republican control of Reconstruction. So, what happens? Samuel Tilden from New York was the Democratic candidate and had won a majority of the popular vote in this 1876 election. Now, because of the dispute in these 3 states, Congress set up a bipartisan electoral commission. So they put Republicans and Democrats on this commission. Well, supporters of the Republican candidate Rutherford B. Hayes met with moderate Southern Democrats to negotiate an agreement. The Democrats said that they would accept Hayes as president if the Republicans agreed to end military occupation of the South. And that's what happened. This agreement became known as the Compromise of 1877. Okay, so the Democrats give Hayes the presidency for Reconstruction ending. All right, so once federal troops withdrew from those southern states, Democrats regained control of all the southern states and Reconstruction came to an end. In the years that followed, Southern Democrats failed to keep their promises to protect African Americans' rights. Poll taxes and literacy tests already disenfranchised Blacks, and now Southern legislators pass a series of Jim Crow laws to segregate not just schools, but also transportation and other public facilities. And most of these laws will stay on the books until the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. All right. So that is all that I have for today. We'll look at these essential questions one more time. Try to answer those. But if you have any questions, let me know. If not, then we will see y'all next time.